Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you're here with us this evening. Happy August and welcome to the Café Muse Literary Salon's annual Poetry in Translation program. Thank you, Michael Davis, for the beautiful music, and thank you to the WordWorks for sponsoring our program. I'm Ellen Cole, and I'm welcoming you tonight and will bid you adieu at the end of the program. Barbara Goldberg, the WordWorks translation editor and distinguished poet and translator, will moderate this evening's program and introduce our readers, poet translators Jose Ballesteros and Jessica Cuello. Our tech wizard tonight is Henry Crawford. We encourage you to donate to Café Muse to support our literary programs. The link to donate will be in the chat. During the reading, you may use the chat to comment or ask questions that our readers may answer during the Q&A period, moderated by Barbara Goldberg if time permits. Our program will be 1 hour long. Audience members have been muted. This helps prevent feedback problems and ensures uninterrupted programming. Please bear with us if we do have a technical glitch. Next month's program will be on Monday, September 14th at 7:15 and will feature poets Luther Jett and Julia Kolchinsky. I hope you'll be able to join us for this exciting program. Before we begin, I want to say a few words about Barbara Goldberg. Poet, translator, and essayist, Barbara was praised by Stanley Kunitz for the inventiveness of her mind and the brilliant assurance of her craft. She's been the recipient of many prestigious awards, fellowships, and honors, and has taught in MFA programs at Georgetown University and American University, awarded fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Yaddo Foundation, the MacDowell Colony, and others, and has published numerous books of her own poetry, books of translated poetry, and has edited a number of anthologies. Her work has been published in many of our most prestigious journals, including Poetry, the Paris Review, the Harvard Review, and Best American Poetry. I'm honored and very pleased to hand over the mic to illustrious poet and translator, Barbara Goldberg.
Hi, this is one of my favorite Café Muse programs. It's once a year. It's co-sponsored by the DC Alt, American Literary Translators. And just as a brief reminder, Arthur Zay, who's the new poet laureate, has said that his focus will be on translation. I thought that, well, why not? And since travel is getting more and more difficult, it's a nice way to travel without leaving your chair. And the other thing that's always has impressed me is that our poet translators this evening are also poets in their own right. And I've always wondered how the two, what shall we say, disciplines fit together, and if one enhances the other or whatever. I mean, you'd think all that time one spends on translating, obsessing about a single word, if all that were turned onto your own poetry, which you do anyway, just think. Anyway, Jose is, okay, this is the craziest title. I have to think that Trump had something to do with this. He's at St. Mary's College in Maryland, and he's head of this department and head of this other department, which has a funny name. Jose, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Okay, do tell us the names of your crazy departments.
So the departments where I work right now is, and it may have changed since I sent it to you, because yes, and this does have to do with our current president, at least the second name. I'm at International Languages and Cultures. I'm a professor of Spanish at St. Mary's College of Maryland. For those of you who don't know, we're a public honors college in Southern Maryland. And then I also do some it's not really moonlighting because everybody knows that I do it, but I do some part-time work at right now we are the Office of Belonging and Signature Scholars Programs is the other
Excuse
office.
me, I want to be in the Department of Belonging. I've always felt like an outsider. I want to belong somewhere.
We take all kinds, Barbara, so you're more than welcome.
Okay, go ahead with this. And what was the other one? Signature or something?
It's
Belong.
right. The latest iteration is the Office of Belonging and Signature Scholars Programs. Yeah.
Oh, well, I know you know what it means. I have a question for you, Jose. What's your mother tongue?
I sort of grew up with both Spanish and English, but I grew up in my first few years of life were spent in Ecuador. I was there
Ah,
in Quito, Ecuador. I was there from until I was about 8, and then I made a move to the States for about 4 years. And then I went back to Ecuador, and then I made another move when I was 16 back to the States. And I've been living in the States ever since and going probably once a year back home.
well, I mean, I think I'm asking because it sounds to me then that Spanish is really your mother tongue, mother tongue.
Yeah, my dad's an American. My dad was born in the U.S. in Chicago of a Canadian nurse and Ecuadorian doctor. So we grew up. We're a fully bilingual family, multicultural. It's hard to pin us down.
It just seems like you're doing something, if I understood your notes to me correctly, that you also translate your own poetry
Yeah, or
from,
rewrite in the other language. But
yeah.
at this point, yeah, I think I fell in love with writing poetry first, and then I sort of fell in love with translating it. And then at one point or another, I decided, why not? Once I write something in one language, why not write it in, see how that feels, how that works out, how that can be rewritten in the other language. So at this point, pretty much almost everything that I've written is also in the other language.
Wow, that's quite a feat. It's not the easiest. But anyway, congratulations.
Thank you.
You've also put together an anthology of DC Hispanic, or shall I say Latino, Latinx writers as well, and you've gotten a Larry Neal Award, etc. And I just want to say one word about the work. If I had tried, I don't think I could have combined two more different voices than you and Jessica's. I have to say that it's not just male and female. It's that your voice, Jose, at least from the work that I've seen of yours, is very direct, blunt, non-poetic. Uh, I don't know. I really have found it fascinating and very compelling. And let me just read a little bit. This is from the poem History. In the beginning, the homeland was a great blank page. The sand, the sea, the surface, the green shadow, the ink with which winter stained the savannah. But suddenly, without anything being able to stop it, there's a man driving his family on the margins. He enters, falls, and climbs to the equatorial line, looking from life. I come from there. I had breakfast with them on the first morning of my town. We built on sown fields against hunger. Well, that's kind of surreal a little bit, but as you say, it's just without affectation. Okay, so now maybe is the time for you to read.
Great. Great. Well, I'll take that poem as sort of a segue. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do first, but first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be reading in front of so many people. I shouted out to some people that I know that are watching, but it's an honor for me to be reading with Jessica today, and I'm really excited to hear her. That's probably the thing I'm mostly excited about is to hear her read tonight. So I'm really excited about that. I'm going to start with some of that poetry. The poem that you read is by Jorge Enrique Adum, who was a poet that was born in Ambato, Ecuador, in the Andes. He died in Quito. He was Last month, we would have celebrated his 100th year. He's a fascinating Ecuadorian Lebanese poet. Um, he was a secretary for Neruda for a couple of years in the early 60s. He had a really fascinating life. Very, very, very hard to to translate his work. I've been on a what was supposed to be a small project, but now it seems like a lifelong project now with his poetry of little by little work, getting some of his work done. Where my poetry from Spanish to English has always been a collaborative effort. My co-translator or sometimes editor in English is Leslie Bayers, who's out at University of the Pacific. And this is part of the work that we've sort of done together. And so I'll start with a little Jorge Enrique Adum, and I'm going to read. I'll finish reading that poem, or I'll start with another poem, and then I will read this poem just to give you a taste of what that work has looked like. And these are poems that would have been written in between the 70s and the 80s from Quito, Ecuador. The first poem has to do a little bit more of life, and sometimes it just feels weird to read translations of poetry out loud when I have my own work. But you can hopefully those of you who like translation by hearing the English can hear, okay, what an intricate poem, or I wonder why he chose that. And then I'll follow it up with history that Barbara just read in that nice introduction. So the first poem is called The Unearth, and it has an epigraph, and it says, "Escape for thy life, look not behind thee," from Genesis. If you were to ask where he comes
Can I
from.
just interrupt 1 second?
Absolutely.
That's from the story of Lot.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah. Then that may
Okay,
be
go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going off his words, right? So off what
Yes.
he has on the page. If you were to ask where he comes from, who he is, where he lives, I could not speak but of the dead. Substances long ago decomposed, from which only portraits remain. If you ask again, I would say that it comes to pass in the room at the back of the house, destroying lips like whips, faces, remains of useless utensils and of transitory relatives in their unwed aloneness. But who can still point to the place of birth? Who in the crossroads of the bedrooms finds the door through which the path was mistaken? Behind their blind lock, the man and his estranged woman, whom the afternoon returns punctually, repeatedly deceive each other with lovers, abandoned or dead, undress in the dark, close their eyes, first the windows, and with their voices and hands lowered, incite each other to sleep because it is cold. But one day they wake up forever naked. They discover the age of the sad conjugal territory, and they tolerate each other one last time, the definitive one, forgiving each other back to back their mute confession of shared time. And by means of successive hips, tipped over like generations of bells, the dry river of habits and ash continues, carries fake flowers, memories, tears used like metals, and in any sun resumes its ancestral cemetery. And it is hard to appease the soul, and it is necessary to save it from the dogged family. Keep it from your beat up schedule and its discounts. Defend it by resigning from the fingernails that no longer defend anything. Help me by pulling out the hard eyelashes that bother sleep, the clothes, the words that establish identity unearthed. Because naked and once again, without history, I come. I greet, I scream, I knock with an exact heart at the home of the resident. I want to touch her hands converted into root of woman and soil. And again, I ask if I were here since before. When did I go home to come back loving this return, if I have arrived already? If I have destroyed the old patrimony of fear and trinkets where God cleared his way with punches, if all I had defended that has, if all that I had and have defended has died of its own noise, of its own sword, so that over the inheritance of savage time and its secrets, so that over its bones definitively terrestrial and broken, over the blood night after night poured on the broken window, on the looms, I may begin to be born or continue resurrecting. So that was the poem Unearthed by Jorge Enrique Adum. And I'll just go ahead and finish history because it's one of my favorite poems by Adum. And I also think it's very pertinent now for Ecuador. If you've been following any news coming from Ecuador, Ecuador during most of my lifetime was a very, very peaceful country. And that has changed in the last few years. And before, when we used to read Jorge Enrique Adum, we would say, this is very powerful political poetry of things we hadn't lived. We couldn't get our head around it to a certain degree. And now it feels very poignant once again. And this is called history. In the beginning, the homeland was a great blank page. The sand, the sea, the surface, the green shadow, the ink with which winter strained the savannah. But suddenly, without anything being able to stop it, there's a man driving his family on the margins. He enters, falls, and climbs to the equatorial line looking for life. I come from there. I had breakfast with them on the first morning of my town. We built sown fields against hunger, a river of cereal we took to the flower, and we knew the laws of the water and the moon. From the second page to today, there is nothing but violence. From the second day on, there wasn't a day where we would not rob our house, where they would not rob our house and corn and occupy the land that I loved like an isle of tenderness. But tomorrow, way before we had thought, I will throw out the invader and I will call my brother, and together we will go to the geography, the sweet rice, the flock of oil, and I will say, "Good morning, ma'am. We are here after so many centuries to collect pay for all the sheaves, to count if the carrots add up just right, and to know how much land we still have left." All right. In honor of some of the people here and that I thank you so much that I've worked together with here, I'm going to read a poem now by this. For a few years, in the almost a decade, I had a small little press out of DC that was called Zozobra Publishing, and we were able to publish several local DC poets. Burgi, who's here on the call, was one of the editors for that, and so we did some great, almost pro bono work to get some of that work out, and we published an anthology and some other people's work. Sammy Miranda published with us, so just some really exciting work. And sporadically I would do some translation for poets that had written in Spanish and do some of that into English. And I'm going to read one of my favorite poems out of the anthology, which is called "Knocking on the Door of the White House." And this is by a local DC poet. Carlos Parada Ayala is a Salvadoran poet who resides in the DC area, and he's a wonderful poet, and I had the pleasure of translating his work. And it's on sickness, and this is a little bit of a riff.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah, and this is a
wanna
little bit
say-
of a riff on Cesar Vallejo's on one of Cesar Vallejo's poems that begins, "It just so happens I'm tired of being a man," is the poet. And here is Carlos Parada's poem translation that I did on sickness. "It just so happens I'm sick of being a fugitive." And the epigraph, I'm sorry, is the Roque, Cesar, Pablo, Naomi, and Arturo. "It just so happens I'm sick of being a fugitive. It so happens I'm sick of being of exile, of the lack of papers, of being illegal. I am sick. It so happens I am sick of being a dollar, of being a remittance, of being a distant brother, of deportations. I am sick. It so happens I'm sick of being a crasher, a beggar, a pothead, a Wanako, son of a this or that. It so happens I am sick of being Roque, of being Cesar, of being Pablo, of being Carlos. I am sick. It so happens that I'm sick of being a weapon, of being a mara, of being a war, of being land of homicide. It so happens I'm sick of kidnappings. It so happens I'm sick of being a killer from the front pages of the Washington Post, the New York Times, La Prensa Gráfica, El Diario de Hoy. It so happens I'm sick of this cross that I was born nailed to. It so happens that I'm sick of being Christ, period. It so happens I'm sick of being a day laborer. It so happens I'm sick of being a brick, a plate, a broom, a lullaby, a floor. It so happens I'm sick of being a prostitute, of this hardcore cumbia I dance naked in the bars. I am sick. It so happens I'm sick of my tongue, of my eyes, of my skin, of my accent, of these words I am sick. It so happens I'm sick of the road, of the trains, of the coyote, of the night, of the wall, and of the border. It so happens I'm sick of the zeal to be a poet. Even of poetry itself I am sick. It so happens I'm sick of presidents, of experts about my homeland, of their think tanks, of their research centers, of their arsenals, and their wars. I am sick. It so happens I am sick of Arizona, of Prince William, of Loudoun County, of San Salvador, and of Washington. I am sick. It so happens I am tired of being male, of being female, of being famine. It so happens I'm sick of happening to be. It so happens I'm sick of sickness. It so happens I'm sick of being, of this conscience that is killing me. I am sick. And that is Carlos Parada Ayala from his book, The Light of the Storm. And a little correction there. That was I'm so tired of being a man. That is a Neruda poem. Um, that is a Neruda poem. So, all right. Let me see. I'm going to do some short ones or shorter. All right. I'll start with this poem, which actually begins. It's one of my poems that was written originally in Spanish and then I made into English, and it actually starts with some Italian. And so the Italian is it's a little bit of Petrarch, and it's fuoco degli occhi, right? So it's fire from the eyes, fire from the eyes, or so the title is Fuoco degli occhi, or an ode to Alba, Italy. And Alba, Italy is in the Piedmont region where all the wines are from and stuff like that. And it's from a little writer's workshop that I conducted there in Alba. So this is a poem from there. You would say I have written this before, some song about departing with hungry eyes, thirsty to find a voice again, but soon restless for a prompt return. As usual, you would say, I ascribe myself some sort of emotional martyrdom, instigated, for example, by noting the way light bounces off a particular structure, or having to negotiate intimate space while my hair and someone else's are blown by the same wind, resulting in an immediate and morbid sense of nostalgia. This is my vernacular, and by now you preface it every time I dial you up. But here, inspiration is a languid matter. Here, lust or any of its derivatives is acceptable by invitation only, and first one must master decorum, bottle up all wanting, age it in apartments casked by winter blinds, make reservations, and finally wait in slow lines just to enter the house of it all. Imagine what it takes to sit at the kitchen table. Imagine what it takes to need the furtive glance of the street to make bread out of it, and then to take the morose lips and make wine. All right, and since we started with a little bit of my origin, I'll talk a little bit about that in this poem. And this poem, the name of this poem is Pit Stop, as in when you do a pit stop in a race. And the title was easy to translate because the title in Spanish is the English pit stop anyway. So that is the pit stop in both. So pit stop. Pit stop. When I was born, the fullness of my mother's breasts dried up, when she saw in my eyes never wanting to stop. They had to save me with the milk of a cousin that suffers the same dementia that sponsored my grandfather's final outings. knocking on all the service doors of the best estates, telling superbly uniformed maids, hush and get his grandkids, to search for the parakeet green Honda that conspiring communists had hidden again, goddammit. A little corpse followed my birth, and if he opened his eyes in the 9 months and 3 days it took him to die, no one saw them. He's under an olive tree next to the Pan American Highway in a hill full of little boxes like compact cars of different colors parked underground filled with little bones. Cockpitted in different positions with pious names conjured up in the final moments by the robed fear of confessors who have done so many laps on the speedway of family embarrassment, lug wrench in hand, waiting for those of us that remain, pedal to the mother of all metals until we run out of gas. Thank you so much.
Okay, Jessica, you're going to be up, but let me talk a little bit about you. Well, this is a woman who is very prolific because not only is she writing poetry and translations, but she teaches, and let me tell you something, she teaches in a place that is a lot of work, and I can tell you that it is. It's in a public high school, and as I believe you teach French, is that correct? Okay, and you go on retreats and you get Saltonstall Foundation grants, and but let me get a little more specific. Okay, so you got the this prize for from Jack Lake Press. I'm sorry, Yours Creature. That's a beautiful cover, by the way. It's of a creature. And also Hunt, which was published by WordWorks. So we know Jessica a little bit. And you wrote a book called Pricking and a book called Liar, selected by Dorian Lux for the Barrow Street Book Prize and honored with the Eugene Nasser Prize and the CNY Book Award. And let's see, it goes on and on, blah, blah, blah. The New Letters Poetry Prize, New Ohio Poetry Prize, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and she's poetry editor of Tahoma Literary Review, which, by the way, publishes translations. So I thought you should know about that, and let's bombard her with, poetry. And she completed her MFA in poetry and translation in Vermont College of the Fine Arts. Jessica, so your book is about this new one. It's by a Canadian author, and it's about the last day in Virginia Woolf's life. And it's, I don't know, it's this guy Percival is in it. And so the first thing I want to know, and I think it's called Percival Falling or something. So tell us about Percival, because I have no idea who he is. And the last thing I want to say is Jessica herself says that this is a book about grief. And because it's a book about grief, it has several marks about it, like repetition, not just words, but whole sentences. I'm going to let you talk about it. And just to say that Jessica's next book, which already is going to be published pretty soon now, right, is called Feral. And who could resist a title like that? And as I said to Jessica, I love the title because her work is feral. Go, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It's really good to be here. I've been at Café Muse before. I love reading with all of you. Jose, it was really great to hear you. I loved how you brought such a beautiful range of voices, including your own. I love that line about wanting more of the breast milk. That's amazing. But those early poems had such, the early ones that you read had such elemental and both intimate images, really strong images. So I'm happy to meet you tonight. So yeah, I'm gonna explain the book a little bit, but first, if I may, just a brief biography about the poet. So the poet is Tanya Longley. She's Quebecoise. She received the Prix Émile Nelligan at age 20. She was born in Montreal. This is Pendant que Percival Tombe. It's her fourth book. And it was awarded the Governor General's Award in Canada and le Prix Alain Grandbois de l'Académie des Lettres du Québec. And I have not met her in person, but I did Zoom with her during my translations. So the book is it's actually a single poem. It's a book-length poem about, yes, it's about Virginia Woolf's last day on Earth, when she committed suicide. And Percival, so it also crosses and intersects with the character of Percival from The Waves, her book, The Waves, which is a book of, it's like a choral of different voices in stream of consciousness. And the only person in that book who doesn't speak is Percival. And he's sort of like the shining light of the group. And, you know, one of the voices is probably T.S. Eliot. So it's this very historical time for literature. But apparently, Percival was based on her brother Toby, who died in India, which devastated her. So the book it's an experimental book. It's kind of odd because there is the references to Virginia Woolf, and then there are references to Percival's, he died in a horse accident from the novel. But there's also, I believe, there's a third voice, which is, I think, the narrator's voice, which is also a voice of grief. And the poems are very small. They're very spare. They fit, you know, they cover just the center of the page, and this is a small book. And they do have this recurrence, and the recurrence is meant to, I think, echo two things. One, the waves, the water. So this like recursive coming and going, lines coming and leaving, but also the galloping of hooves, right? There's this sense of movement connected to death. And so when I translated it, I had to be careful to repeat the lines so that you would hear the music of them returning. And it doesn't return in a linear way. The book is constructed almost like a puzzle. It took me a long time to figure out who the pronouns referred to, who is being referenced. And that's part of its beauty. I mean, part of the beauty of this book is you are entranced by the movement of it. And it took me multiple readings to absorb the different characters in it. So I'm going to read it just straight without talking between. And I'm not going to read the whole book, but I will read it in order, skipping different parts. And I think I will maybe read, there are 4 sections, maybe between sections, I will read the section title in French so you know there's a new section. And okay, so here we go. And it begins with an epigraph by Woolf from The Waves. The waves fell, withdrew, and fell again, like the thud of a great beast stamping. Tu jouais une berceuse de Brahms. You were playing a Brahms lullaby. This story doesn't end well. He dies, trampled by a dappled gray horse. This story roars, bloodied hooves now run. Percival's song is a defiant beast, a howling story. I am a defiant beast. Such beauty that summer, blue forget-me-nots. You played a Brahms lullaby while Percival fell. I won't know how to explain the waves to you, like the extreme fixity in passing objects. No doubt, the heart is a story, maybe a roar. Some say murmur, something whispered, so the waves begin again. All this happens in a single day. Picture the sun, my dead love, a wandering thing that burned my eyes. Percival, it's just stones in my coat pockets. I'm not crazy. I drown often. The day ends well, and the river is sweet. Imagine if it was you, trapped one day in a freezing river, joined to another life, and holding it in your hands before it fled. You don't know how to write with lightness. You only know how to sink into icy water. Something cried near your knees by the rocks. The sudden waves roared. And I will pause for a moment. It's kind of intense and dense, but some of the lines that recur are from her letters, and there are a few from her own diaries. This idea, at the end of her life, she was afraid she would never write properly again. So that line comes up, that she won't. There's another line, I will never find the right words. And it is kind of an odd thing that it's a French poet writing about Virginia Woolf. And so these lines obviously were first in English, but the Quebecois poet put them into French. And that might be something for Q&A. You don't know how to write with lightness. You only know to sink into icy water. Something cried near your knees by the rocks. The sudden waves roared. This story is the thud of someone falling from a horse. It cracks the sky. Look at Percival who shouts for us to give him his head, to give him back his head. Since this happens in a single day, I no longer remember the dappled sunlight. Percival never returns to this light, he will never. The day is young, and the worst is yet to come. Will you write summer as if no one is looking? You must forgive me, busy as I am with dying. More fervent than a soldier, dying secretly for love. I sometimes write books, nothing that matters, and lavender sickens the cat. The horses despair. This story won't end well. They say she'll die from it. It must be the roar of the sea. Tu traversais les champs de Rodmel à pied. You cross the fields of Rodmel on foot. Riddles begin in a broken sky. The roar gallops past, an act of faith is killing us. It's almost noon, as two men watch you pass the church with your walking stick and your Wellington boots. How strange, they say, since you normally write while walking in the afternoon. Maybe you aren't dead. Maybe you are nothing, unbearably light. I was asleep when you said, save yourself. Forgive me for yesterday. Let's go look for where I am. In the margins of the saddest notebook, I write false words, useless marks of punctuation. Mournfully, I begin again to find the right words. Monk's House, East Sussex. We let summer sink us at last. I learned by heart your suicide note after crying for days in the Bloomsbury apartment. You never again work in the greenhouse. You do what little you can to care for yourself, and at 11 o'clock, write a farewell letter no one understands. Today they pulled your body from the ooze, stiff like the stones in your coat pockets. A river opened in the channel. It was March. Percival was falling as you walked across the fields of Rodmel. Tu ne plaisantais pas avec les mouettes. You weren't joking about the seagulls. Broken vertebrae, but safer than a horse, I carry you in me like despair. I revise C and repetition. I'll be right there for you to open the sky gently with a piston. This time, I will write properly, I promise. You'll see me emptied of my ghosts at last. You say the story is always a love of beauty. Without it, we are a walk to the lighthouse, indecent, torn by light. Without it, we reach the sky. Your clumsiness was beautiful, like your idea of a poem. Think of voice. Think of small animal, faith above all. Repetition will save us. It's late. Water rises in the bedroom. You say the voices have come back, stubborn as waves. I rock you and you repeat, he is dead, he is dead. This was last Sunday. Look, dead horses rise with you. On your return to the house, overcome with brightness, you say we come back to the beginning, and the first morning will be peaceful. Nothing but the squawk of seagulls, but you are gone and cannot soothe them. If you return, it will be July, and you, radiant beside the fields, will tell us how you swam a long time, watching the seagulls and their strange sickness. You don't dare look at your hands. You weep and faintly erase Percival's life, one vertebrae at a time. Don't you see that prose has flaws, that you must race late as ever on your horse in purest form to end it? 3 weeks later, on the 18th of April, they found your body near Southeast Bridge. They say the light was weak and the river sweet. Let's finish it. No message, only some lesions, night hammers, a trusting patience. I begin again to find the right words. There you go.
Thank you. That's good in the sense that we have time for questions.
Jonah had a question early on about the sentences that Jose was reading. He says, "Is this a few sentences, one sentence?"
Or
I
one
can
sentence, yeah.
hear the challenge, lots of movement and verb tense. So maybe we can let Jose talk a little bit about that structure.
Yeah. Yes. What I would say about Adum is he's extraordinarily experimental, and so it really depends on the poem. But particularly in that poem Unearthed, the sentences are really long, and I think we sort of there's a it's not really a style, but it's something we lean into emotionally in the Andean region. Those of us from the high Andes is sort of this sort of neo-Baroque style of writing, which it's not necessarily flowery language, but it's sort of very complex as far as syntax is concerned. Not necessarily punctuation at all, but just this long syntax, getting as much as you can sort of into each line or phrase, and sort of extending that to make those things into sort of one big, sort of morsel that you can sink your teeth into as a reader. So yes, in those two poems, there is that characteristic of these sort of longer sentences.
In my comment, I asked, why is it funny? It struck me as being very funny. It's bad of me to say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's for people from Quito, we have these very I don't want to generalize, but sort of in Andean cities, very traditional Andean cities, the culture is sort of very formal, and so there's this mixture of humor within these very deep things. Even in Pit Stop is a little poem. Not to compare myself to the great Adum, but Pit Stop is a poem about loss and losing a little brother. We lost a child. The family, my mother lost a child when he was 3 days old. But it's sort of in the same breath. You say it in the same breath as like, yeah, remember that was like around the time where grandpa would lose his car all the time and show up at our door, telling us that the communists had moved his car again, right? And these things are sort of, humor is a way to sort of get through the day, or was a way to get through the day in those cultures. So it's this very sort of like it's almost like it can come up as a cynical humor, but it's like funeral jokes or something like that. You know what I mean? But it's a way to get through the grief.
It's very compelling.
I have a question for Jose. Um, I'm really curious how it's different when you translate your own work versus other people. That's
Um, well, I think it would depend on when in my career. I think probably more as a translator. As a translator, I was my I've made the mistake of translating some really sort of complex stuff. One of the translation, my first sort of published translation project is by a Peruvian writer called Marcial Molina Richter, and he has like the poem that was written about the violent period in Peru in Ayacucho, and we got to fly down there and to talk about his poem. And I think it started sort of, I don't want to say, very literal, because as translators, that's almost dangerous to say. It's like I'm doing stuff that's very literal. But I think what I'm doing now with my own work but I've always taken some risks in translating, even if it was other people. And with my poetry nowadays, I do so even more so. I mean, I found I don't know if it's happening to some of you guys. I'm starting to find stuff that I didn't realize that I had written and I'm not talking about 10 years ago. I'm talking about like last year or something like that. And the latest that I found is a project I'm working now that deals a little bit more with spirituality. And I I found um I found one poem, and in the English version there was a whole sort of stanza that was almost missing, but the English version conveyed everything it needed to convey without that stanza. And I was trying to think back when I was translating. I was like, did I do that on purpose as a translator? Did I like how did that work when I was going through? So to sum it up, I take a lot more liberty now, and I used to feel less comfortable about that, particularly because most of the work that I've written has begun in Spanish, and I wanted to make sure that the English version got all of this stuff that I had sort of packed in there. But the more I translate now, the more freedom I take with the other language, just to say, and I think I want to get to the point eventually where it's for somebody that's looking for literalness, it'll just feel they'll be like, "What are you doing here?" But it will also be like, "Well, if you're fully bilingual, you'll get it." You know what I mean? And so it sets the bar high for bilingualism, but it's a fun sort of next place for me to go with the stuff that I'm doing.
I love that.
Thank you for that question.
Jessica, actually, you could talk about that too. Why is literalism the kiss of death?
Well, it was it's a good question for me. I'm not as experienced as Jose. This is my first translation. I may be my last. I'm actually more comfortable with my own work. This book was a very good lesson for me in who I was because when I began translation, I was very afraid I didn't know that this was a thing that everyone knows, but I didn't really understand that um, fidelity could be the kiss of death. And so I was so afraid of hurting the work. And you actually gave me really good advice. I don't know if you remember this, but I sent you a few pages from this book. And you told me two things. You said, Jessica, why aren't you flying in the translation like you are in your own work?
I
And
said that.
you did, but it was so great for me. And then you said you need to cover up the French and just think about the poem. And I was afraid to enter the poem. And the irony about this is I started translation because the work that I was writing, my own work, was so intense that
Right.
I thought the translation would be a respite from the intensity, but you actually end up confronting the same problems in disguise that you have on work. Like there you are again in the translated work. And I actually, it's a funny story too, because I came to translation sort of by accident. I had started spontaneously, like many people during COVID, I started a low residency MFA, which I would never have done if I didn't have somewhat of this looser schedule for 3 months. And when I came back to school, well, when I thought I could get part of my tuition covered by my school district. And so I called them, can you give me a salary boost if I get this degree? And my superintendent first, she said, what's an MFA? So I explained it to her. And then she went and looked at the website and she came back and she said, well, we'll cover a lot of it if you get the translation part. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm gung ho with the translation. So I wasn't actually bent on doing the translation part. And so part of it was like an economic accident. And then when we came back to school, I had this terrible study hall of like 90 kids in a cafeteria, all in masks, and me yelling, put your mask back on, being a real bitch, kids who didn't know me. And we were all so unhappy that I had bought all of these French books to translate, and I had the book with me, and I brought dictionaries to my table, and I just sat there every day in this 2-hour study hall translating very faithfully. And I think that act was actually saved me in some ways during that study hall. But then I had to do many more iterations to arrive at the final edition. So
I don't know how many of you are aware, but the current MFA program, from what I understand, now has a translation requirement, which means that translators are being spit out of these. I don't mean to say spit out, but there are just so many, and the whole thing is just blossoming, one could say. And I wonder how you all feel about that, since this was not really part and parcel. Actually, in my program, it was, but mine was an unusual program because it did have a translation requirement. But I'm not aware of other programs that did. And now the place is swarming with translators. Are you finding that as you edit your magazine, Jessica, that you're being smothered in translations?
I mean, I wouldn't use the word swarm or smother
Oh,
because
really?
I think for so long, I mean, when I was a kid in high school, I don't think I read a single poem in translation. Maybe Rilke. I
Right.
didn't I didn't know what was out there. And so, I think the thing about poetry is that just the act of participating in the poetry world, if you're practicing translation, you may not end up publishing translation, you may not
That's true.
book of translation, but it brings you closer to more poets. It brings you closer. I mean, it opens up your world, and we're really in need of that.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I actually don't get enough translations at Tahoma. I don't think we get enough. In our issue coming out next week, we only have two. I mean, we only take 10 poems when we read, and we get like 900 poems, but the translation submissions are very small. So, and I will say this too about people who try translation. I did the translation workshops I did in my MFA were my favorite workshops because everyone had such a generous spirit. And people's reasons for studying another language were, I want to talk with my grandmother. I want to translate my grandmother's letters. Or I'm going to this place and I found this book. And one of the people in my workshop was in the military and he had found a book while he was overseas and he became really attached to the book. So he wanted to learn how to translate it. So you get this kind of intimate relationship with something that's not in your own myopic little world for some
Oh,
of us. Like Jose's world is
I
already,
was just going to
you
say,
were born into this, this is a lot of white Americans, Jose, you're born already into this world of so many places at once.
This is a wonderful conversation, but we are nearing the end. And Barbara, thank you so much for hosting. I'm going to turn it back to Ellen, and we will hopefully see you next month.
I want to second Karen. Has been a wonderful discussion, and Jessica, I lost my brother 2 years ago, and so the poems you're reading were very meaningful to me. Both of you, Jessica and Jose, those were wonderful poems. Thank you for reading them to us. They were complex and compelling. Barbara, thank you for curating and presenting this wonderful program and these two excellent and thought-provoking poets. Michael, your music was lovely as always. Thank you. And Karen, thank you and the WordWorks for sponsoring Café Muse. Henry and Luther, thank you for your technical magic. And to my fellow co-hosts, thank you. Claire McGough, Luther Jett, Henry Crawford, and Majda Gama for doing the good work that goes into creating Café Muse. And most importantly, thank you, our beautiful audience, for being here with us. We appreciate you so much. You're the whole reason Café Muse exists. If you want to watch tonight's program again, it will be up on Café Muse's YouTube channel tomorrow, and you can extend your enjoyment by telling others about our series. I hope you can join us for the next Café Muse program on Monday, September 14th at 7 p.m., featuring poets Luther Jett and Julia Kolchinsky. Please make sure you registered on our Café Muse website so you receive information on the event as well as the Zoom link. This will be a hybrid program, in person at the Writers Center in Bethesda, and also live on Zoom. So have a wonderful evening. I recommend reading poetry instead of doom scrolling, and I hope we'll see you again soon. Good night.
Good night.